keep looking straight ahead like y'all didn't have those issues. But I'm telling you, man, it'll help you if you read your Bible and find out exactly what Jesus said. And we'll see what the Lord has. If you have your Bibles this morning, you'd like to open them up to the book of Exodus. I want to grab a couple verses out of there, and then we're going to go to the New Testament and do a quick comparison and drop a little thought that the Lord gave me. I'm not real good at points, but I'm good at thoughts. So I have thoughts. Amen. But in Exodus chapter 3, very familiar passage of Scripture. I'm probably going to tell you anything you don't already know today, but I want to share a thought that I think will be helpful. I think it will encourage you in your walk with the Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Exodus chapter 3. Y'all know the story of Exodus. You all seen the movie. You all know all about it already. So you know everything I'm getting ready to say before I say it. But let me give you maybe just a couple of you all, because I know he hasn't seen the movie yet. But in the story of Exodus, we are at the point where Moses has run away from Egypt, because he's already tried to be a deliverer by himself.
Yeah.
Have you ever known anybody, or have you ever been guilty of having a call of God on your life, but instead of waiting for God to open the door, you decided you would open the door anyway? Have you ever opened the wrong door? Because even what Moses did wasn't necessarily wrong, because how did God deliver the Israelites? Did he not kill the firstborn?
Yeah.
So Moses' action was similar to what God wanted done. But just because it's similar, it does not mean it's the same.
Exactly.
For those who've been in the parking lot, see that I'm finally driving my truck. If you don't know, my truck burned down. And I have been dealing with folks trying to get a truck for the last number of months. I don't know. I'm not a car person. I'm not a truck person. I like what I like. But I am a person that once I like something, I want it. So I go into the place and I tell them, here's what I want you to pull up whatever I had at 2016 model and give me the 2018 model of the same thing. Now, how do y'all think that's difficult? I didn't think it was difficult either. And it seems like every time I go in there, they're telling me this is the exact same thing. And I get in there, and it doesn't have what the other one had. Now, I don't know if that's just me becoming frustrated. And I'm like, it is similar, but it ain't the same. That's where we get into trouble, because we like the lady who came to the altar and prayed one day, and somebody said, have you prayed through? It's an old expression. Have you prayed through? Have you gotten saved? She goes, I don't know, but I'm so close you can't tell the difference. I don't know that I really want to be living on the edge in that capacity.
Amen.
So sometimes what happens with Moses is Moses knew that God had called him to be a deliverer, but he didn't like the timing of God. Y'all ain't going to say nothing. I'm the only person that gets frustrated with God's timing. I mean, sometimes I laugh because we tease our drummer all the time. Because I'm like, you are the drummer. Everybody plays to you. Quit listening to everybody else. Well, they're not singing that fast. Ain't my problem. You play you play the tempo. Let them change. You are the pace setter. That's why you're the cadence. That's why you're the drummer. I've argued that for years. My son's a drummer. And I would yell at him, quit changing. He goes, but they're not with me. I said, that's their problem. When you're in the front, you set the pace.
That's right. Amen.
So now he plays with a click in his ear. He hears the click and he just plays to the click. And he just, when people aren't getting to him, he quits doing all the fancy stuff and comes back to 1, 2, 3. I mean, he just, some of y'all Army people, you understand that. You have to yell to the people when they're going to walk. Left, right, left. Because otherwise they get confused. So you have to teach them those things. So Moses understood what God was going to do, but he didn't like the timing in which God was going to do it. Now here's the big thing we miss many times, is when Moses screwed up, and did his own thing. Now he has to run for his life. Now, you may not appreciate that, but if you've ever been a repo person in your life, you will appreciate running for your life. And so he runs for his life. He runs to the backside of the desert, ends up meeting some person, finding some cute girl, ends up getting married. He's decided his life is forever going to be different because of his one mistake.
Wow.
Y'all awful quiet. For a Presbyterian church, you're even quiet. So the thing is, we're not Presbyterian, but the thing is when you understand this, how many of us let our mistakes stop us from going forward?
Amen.
How many of us let our mistake redirect us so that now we're willing to sit on the backside of the desert and do nothing when God had something else planned for us? We think because we screwed up that God's done with us because we don't understand grace.
That's right.
We don't understand forgiveness. We don't understand the mercy of God. We let our past define our future, and our past does not define our future. Our past is what we learn from to say, quit trusting in ourselves and rely wholly on God. However, Moses is minding his own business. He's on the backside of the desert. He's out there watching somebody else's sheep. There's nothing worse than being called to be a shepherd and watching somebody else's sheep.
That's right.
There's nothing worse than being called to be the person who's in charge of 1 million+ people and you're watching somebody else's sheep. Moses was called to be the shepherd of the house of Israel, and yet he's being the shepherd of somebody else's sheep. Are you living below where God's called you to be? Okay, now listen, y'all start amen, or I'm going to start throwing stuff at you. Thank you. Are you living? It wasn't this hard when I was putting it together. You all were a lot more responsive in my room. I'm just going to tell you. When I was putting this together, y'all was amening, and you know, you all should really show up in church like you do in my study. So the thing is, so Moses is there minding somebody else's sheep, thinking that his life is now regulated to this instead of what God had called him to be, living below what God had called him to be. And he's out there minding his own business, and he looks over and he sees this bush burning. Now, if you've ever been to the desert, Iraq, some of these places like that, if you've ever been to Masada in the summer, where you know it gets so hot, stuff catching on fire may not necessarily blow your mind, but stuff that's on fire that's not being consumed. I don't mind, you know, watching a fire that's consuming something, and you're watching a fire die out. That ain't no big deal. Have you ever seen one of those logs? We grew up in a place where we had to heat our house, and we would go out and we would cut wood on the side. You know, trees would fall down. We'd go over there, cut it up, put it in our truck real fast, car real fast, and get it back home before anybody came by and saw us. I can't be the only person in America who ever cut trees. So but then occasionally we would find one of those Everlast logs. It would burn for like 4 or 8 hours. We love those things. I love them. Because if you've never heated your house with a fireplace, you may not appreciate the fact that you don't have to get up every few hours and put something else on the fire. But when you can get an Everlast log, you put it on and you think it's going to burn everlasting. But even it tells you it's everlasting as long as ever is only 4 hours. Moses is watching this bush burn, and it's not being consumed. So he does like all the rest of us. That's cool. Let's go see what's checking out. So he starts walking over to the bush, and when he gets there, all of a sudden, and this is the part that blows my mind, okay? I've read this verse thousands and thousands of times, and it blows my mind that when he starts walking to the bush, God speaks to him and says, take your shoes off, you're on holy ground. And Moses is still there. If you walked out of your driveway and you get ready to walk into the kitchen of your house and you hear somebody tell you, take your shoes off. This is holy ground. And it ain't your wife's voice. It ain't your husband's voice. It ain't your mama's voice. You are not taking your shoes off. You was running back out the garage trying to get out of there because you don't know who's talking to you.
That's right.
If you've been watching a bush and you ain't seen nobody, and you start walking to a bush, y'all need to read your Bible. Because y'all read it and all of a sudden you're like, God said, Moses, take your shoes. And he's like, ooh, yeah, God said. Y'all ain't never heard God talk to y'all. Because when God says stuff to you, it'll scare you. Let me prove it to you. Hey, Peter, get out of the boat. Walk on water.
I rebuke you.
I don't even get in water without putting my toe in. I sure ain't going to start walking on it. Y'all look like, I got out of the boat. I didn't get out of the boat. You like all the other 11 men sitting in the boat saying, go, Peter. Go, Peter. Get your walk on. Get your walk on. You ain't going out the boat. Y'all so super spiritual in the 21st century. But if you'd have been there in the real world, when I almost... See, here's how I know people act differently. Candid camera.
Yes.
See, I grew up with Alan Funt and Candid Camera. And they would have people walk into different situations and somebody would start talking to them. And they didn't do what the person said. They did.
Yeah.
They had the scared look. Like the music was changing. Y'all ain't never watched a scary movie where the music changes. Then you start yelling at the screen, run! He's behind the door! The music is changing and Moses, God says, take your shoes off, this is holy ground. And Moses is still there. That may not surprise you all, but it surprises me. Because I'm thinking, and then to take your shoes off in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, right.
And walk on sand.
And rocks.
See, we read this too quickly. We're reading this and we're walking on sand like it ain't no big deal. But when God calls you to get close, it's painful.
Yeah.
Amen.
Okay, yeah. I'm just saying, God calls him to get close, and all of a sudden Moses takes his shoes off and begins to walk up there, and then he and God have a discussion. Now that part doesn't surprise me at all, because we have those all the time. We have them all the time. Y'all look like y'all don't have them all the time, but y'all have them all the time. God will talk to you about doing different things, and you're like, well, Lord, if it's really you. Lord, if this is really, really you. Lord, if it's really, 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 really you. You know, if I'm really supposed to, that part doesn't surprise me. But then we get to the part that I find so interesting. That's in chapter 3, where Moses gets there and he's talking to God, and God is telling him to go back to the children of Israel. God always will send you back as a representative of him to your past. I just want you to know that was a mic drop moment. Y'all missed it. I see it in my office. Y'all, it hit you. Y'all understood that, and y'all went, "Wow!" Started praising the Lord, but that's okay. I'll live in my mind. Because too often, when we're living in somebody else's shepherd and God speaks to us, we don't mind being godly over here, but don't make people of my history know what my future is.
Yeah.
But what good is it to not go back to the people who called you an outcast and who said God can't do nothing with you, and you're the wrong person for the job, and you don't talk right. Or I hear you don't preach right. You shouldn't say those kind of things. That's what I hear all the time. And I'm like, you're probably right. But God sends him back to his past. Now the scary thing is, when you go back to your past, you better know who sent you.
Amen.
See, if you just keep going back to your past, and I don't mean go back to your past and do the same stuff. I mean as a representative of God's change in your life, as a representative of what God can do in your life. When you walk to your past, you got to walk back knowing who sent you.
That's right.
So Moses asked the most important question that I think is in Scripture when he says, "Who shall I say sent me?" Now there's a verse we're trying to get to in chapter 3. It's verse 14. I'm sure by now y'all have found it. It's a long introduction. So here we go. And God said to Moses, to the question, "Who shall I say sent me?" And God says, you tell them, "I am who I am."
Yes.
Amen.
You shall say to the children of Israel, "I am has sent me to you." I am Yahweh is what it says. Yahweh has sent me.
Hallelujah.
I am. I am the self-existent one.
Yes.
I don't need anybody else to exist. I existed before there was even an existence to exist in.
Yes.
Right.
In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. But before there was light, before there was time, before there was day, before there was a place, He is a self-existent one.
Yes.
Yes.
He's God all by Himself. He even
Yes.
said to Abraham, "I looked around to try to find somebody I could swear by, and there was nobody greater than me.
Yes.
So I swore by myself."
Amen.
George Burns got it right. Do you tell the truth? I swear to tell the truth, so help me.
Yeah.
YouTube it. So help me. I'm just saying, because who else are you going to swear by? Ain't nobody else to swear by. So he says, you go tell them, "I am has sent you." Go back and tell them Yahweh sent me. Now notice who he said who to tell that to. Go tell the children of Israel, "Yahweh has sent me."
Yes.
What you tell Pharaoh don't matter. Pharaoh ain't going to believe nothing anyway.
That's true.
Unbelievers never believe you've been changed. Unbelievers never believe God's really done something in your life. They think you cleaned your act up, but they don't know God's changed you. But children of Israel ought to know that if God can change you, y'all ain't saying nothing. Why do I got to go back and let other folk who said, "Well, I know what you used to..." See, your family
Yeah.
is your history. Your family is always going to remind you of how you screwed up.
Yes, they will.
Come on now, we all got those people in our family that it don't matter. I know the country song says that Jesus and Mama always loved you, but Jesus forgot and Mama keeps reminding you. Jesus will forgive and forget your sins, but your mama, your daddy, your brother, your sister, your cousin, they all know. I know that to be true because when Jesus went back to his family and his area where he grew up, they said, "Isn't he the carpenter's son?"
That's right.
All they wanted to talk about was the Jesus they knew, not the Jesus they experienced.
Right.
The Jesus they knew growing up, not the Jesus that came with power and might. So there's too many people in your life that always want to talk about your failures and your shortcomings and your mistakes and your problems and all the things you did wrong in your life. Quit talking to them. All you tell them is, God said, "Let my people go." So what do you tell people who always talk about your past? Let me go. Let me walk out of here. To other believers, you say, "Look what the Lord has done. Yahweh has sent me. I am who I am, has sent me to let you know He's working it out."
Yes.
Now, here's why this is so important. Because when Jesus came along, He rocked everybody's world.
Yes,
Yep.
he did.
I'm going to give you a couple of these real fast. I hope you follow me on this. Go to John 6 real quick. John chapter 6. This is after Jesus had fed 5,000 people, and he had gone on the other side of the river or the lake, and he gets on the other side of the lake, and all of a sudden all the people found him, and they're like, Rabbi, how did you get here? We were looking for you. And Jesus says in verse 26, most assuredly I say to you, seek me not because you saw signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has set his seal on him. He goes on and says, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. In other words, quit looking for me just for your miracle, and look to me for who I am.
Amen.
And then he goes on in verse 35 and says, I am the bread of life.
Yes, he is.
Amen. Amen.
Exodus 3. Moses, you go tell those people who are stuck in their past, the people who are going to remember your failures and your mistakes, you go tell those people, I am who I am. The great I am has sent me. Jesus comes along, and after doing miracles of provision, now tells them, I am the bread of life. Now, we may not fully appreciate that, but if you're a Jew and you hear I am the bread of life, your mind is immediately going to go back to the life-sustaining manna that came from heaven that got you through to the promised land.
That's right.
So when he says, I am the bread of life, what he is equating himself to is, I am is a phrase that the Jews wanted to kill him over.
Yep.
Because he said, I am. And before Abraham was, I am. When he said, before Abraham was, I am, he is quoting Exodus 3. He is saying, God and I, we're the same.
Right.
We are the same. And people freak out over that. I don't know why they freak out. But he says, I am who I'm supposed to be. I am the bread of life. What you ate in manna, what you ate in the wilderness, that was me. I am the bread. Y'all ain't saying. See, we eat bread as a luxury. We eat bread before the meal. But in Mediterranean areas, bread is the meal.
Yep.
You get you a piece of pita bread, they put some falafel. My wife says it's something awful. Falafel. You put some falafel in it, you put some stuff in it, and that's how you carry your stuff around, and you eat your bread. That's how that is a part of your life. It is what sustains you throughout every day. So Jesus looks at them and says, you've been looking for me to feed your bellies, but your belly is not what needs to be fed. You need bread of life that'll sustain you beyond the perishing of what is natural.
Yes, yes, yes.
He is telling the same thing that Moses. You go tell the children of Israel, I am what they have need of. I am what they have need of. See, we always murmur and complain when we don't see God's provision. Y'all don't believe me? Okay? After the 10 plagues, they came to the Red Sea. When they got to the Red Sea, what did they do? Complain.
Yep.
Why? They didn't see the Red Sea part. So now they got to wait on God's timing for the Red Sea to part. They don't know what God's going to do. Here's the funny thing. They're complaining, but the Egyptians aren't gaining on them. Because God has a cloud that's got them stuck. They are on the treadmill of life. The Egyptians are running. Have you ever run miles on a treadmill to realize you ain't gone nowhere? I mean, here you are sweating. You think you've done something. Woo, 18 miles. Get off, and you're still in the same spot you started from. That's how many of us run from God. And the Egyptians were trying to run after the Israelites. Those are good points. Y'all are just missing them. The Israelites the Egyptians are running after the Israelites, but God's got a cloud there, and they're all running, and the horses are running, but they ain't getting no closer. But while they're waiting for the Red Sea to part, and Egypt's not getting any closer, they're complaining because they don't see the provision. Jesus says, I am the bread of life.
Yes.
Quit looking for provision in the natural and look to me to sustain you beyond what you normally see.
Yes.
Amen.
I am the bread of life.
Hallelujah.
I am that bread. I am the manna that was sent down from heaven. I am the one that your fathers wish they could see. They wish they could be in this day. They wish that. Hebrews says the same thing. We read the Hall of Faith, but at the end it says, all these guys died wishing they could see your day.
That's right.
Wishing they could see the day. See, it goes on and says, I am the bread of life. Let me hurry up. Go to Rome. Not Romans. Go to John 8. Just real quick. I got to hurry. John 8, verse 12. Jesus is talking to people, and right after the woman is caught in adultery, and he says, whoever had cast the first stone, without sin, cast the first stone. They all run away. She says, go, sin no more. And then Jesus looks to the people around him. He says, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but the light of life. Verse 12. Jesus is the light of the world. So he says, I am the bread and I am the light. And how important is that? How about in Genesis chapter 1? God said, let there be light. Jesus is trying to remind people, I'm the bread that sustains your life. But when you're caught in sin and all you see is the darkness around you, y'all ain't saying nothing. All you see is how that your death is imminent and your judgment is nigh. And you think there's no hope for you. I am the light of the world. Y'all ain't saying that. I am the light of the world. To the unbeliever, I can give light. I can be the one that creates life out of the midst of the chaos of your life. Because in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. The earth was without form and void. Can I say it like this and not do much damage to the text? In the beginning, God saw your life was without form and void. In the beginning, before you ever got to where you're so confused and caught up in whatever it is you've been caught up in, and your life is without form and void, and darkness is covering the face of the deep, let God speak to you and say, I am the light of the world.
Amen.
I am the light of the world. Let me speak light to where you are so it illuminates you to see the possibilities of your future in front of you. If you don't like that, how about over in John 9:5? In John 9:5, there was a blind man who came. And Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Look, let me touch you. Not only am I the light of the world in your eternal realm, I am the light of the world in your physical realm. I am come to give you light, to illuminate to you, to bring revelation to you. I am come that you might see beyond what you've always seen. I am come that you might know beyond what you've always known. How do I know that? Matthew 5, 6, and 7. You heard, but I say. You heard, but I say. You heard, but I say. So he's bringing illumination. He's bringing light. He's bringing revelation. Because why? What does God do? He comes to the children of Israel and says, you've been slaves for 400 years. For 400 years you thought I wasn't listening. But I heard you on the first day. I heard you on the first day. And now is the time for your deliverance. Now is the time for you to come forth. Now is the time for you to reap the reward of the pain that you've gone through. Now is it. See, we get caught up in the moment of the day. Forget the day. The day is just the moment, but eternity lasts forever.
Yes. Hallelujah.
I'm bringing you into a place that you cannot even imagine. I'm bringing you into a place that is greater than all you've ever thought of before. He says, the old song says that the half has never yet been told. The half has never yet been told. The half, that means there's still a whole lot more that is still to be told when we realize what God has for us. He brings bread of life. He brings light to the unbeliever. He brings light into those who need physical healing and illumination and things. In fact, James says, you need wisdom, ask of him. He gives liberally to people.
Yes. He does.
He's the light of the world. How about in John 10? In John 10, I got to hurry. In John 10, he starts saying that I am the door to the sheep. I am the door to the sheepfold. I am. See, we don't fully appreciate this. In fact, I'm going to tie this in with the next one, which is later on in John 10, somewhere around verse 30, I believe it is. He says, I am the good shepherd.
That's right.
I'm the door to the sheep, and I'm the good shepherd. Let me help you. When I went to Israel the first time, back in the 90s, by the way, if you'd like to go with me this year, I'll be going in 19 back in April. Would love to have you join me. It's going to be fun. When I went there, instead of going to Bethlehem to where they have commercialized the place where they think Jesus may have been born, our group stopped out in the middle of a shepherd's field.
Yay.
Got off the bus and we went to a place, and the guy said, now this is not the place Jesus was born. Y'all chill. Don't be starting no new religion. He says, however, he says, I'm bringing you here because this is a place like where Jesus was born. And he brought us into what would be called a stable, was really nothing more than a hollowed out cave.
Yep.
But to get into the cave was only about 2.5 to 3 foot wide. So to get into the cave, you had to duck down and step into the cave before it opened up. So what Jesus says is, I am the door to the sheep.
That's right.
So if all the sheep are here and this is the door, what Jesus is saying is, I sleep and I rest at the door place so that nothing can get to the sheep and none of the sheep can get out without disturbing me and waking me up and making sure that I become the protector of your sheep. I become the protector of my people. Y'all ain't saying that. I become the one that makes sure the safety of the people. The sheep is not dependent on sheep. The safety of the sheep is dependent upon the shepherd. That's why Moses was a shepherd. The safety of the people depended on him being a shepherd for the people. And he may have learned it in the wrong spot, but he put it to practice where God wanted him to be. Pastor, how can you say that? Because when God got mad at the children of Israel and said, I'm going to kill them all. Justifiably so. I'm going to kill them all. We're going to start over. Moses said, don't do it, Lord. He stood.
Yes.
He stood as a shepherd saying, Lord, if you kill them, what are they going to say?
That's right.
What are the enemies going to say? What are the naysayers going to say? They're going to say you couldn't have kept them. You couldn't have changed them. You couldn't have done this. Lord, let me stand in the stead of them. Let me stay in the place of them. He says, well, I'm going to send angels instead of my presence. Moses said, Lord, if you send angels, we ain't going nowhere. If we ain't got your presence, we ain't got nothing. That's the shepherd. That's the door that says, I know what's behind me. I got to protect what's behind me.
Yes.
I don't care what you say on the outside. You can cuss me like a sailor on the outside, but don't try to come in my house in the middle of the night. That's a good way to die. Because your dogs nothing. I don't need dogs to shoot you. You would shoot somebody until it was empty. Until the threat is stopped. Pull the trigger. Well, that ain't right.
Too bad.
Tell you what. Tell me where you live. I'll come and get your stuff. Yeah, you know, because who steals a cheese grater? I'm just saying. Now, if you don't understand that, that's another YouTube. People will do that, but Jesus says, I'm the door. I am the keeper of what is valuable to me. I'm so depressed. Ah! Nobody likes me. Jesus loves you. He's the door and he's keeping you. But nobody else likes me. Take a bath. I don't want to tell you. Be friendly.
Amen.
But quit complaining. Because the only safe place you got is behind the door. On the other side of the door. On the other side of the door are wolves trying to eat you. That's why he's also called the Good Shepherd. Because the Good Shepherd will fight for you.
Thank you. Yes.
The Good Shepherd will figure out a way to pin the 99 while he searches for the one.
Yes. Thank you, God.
Is it the Crab family that sings that song, He Came Looking for Me? He came looking for me. 99, he didn't say that's close enough. He didn't say that's good enough for government work. That's close enough for heaven work. No. He went looking for me.
Thank you.
When I couldn't come to him, he came, y'all ain't saying nothing. He came looking for me. Found us in different spots around our lives in the world, but he came looking because he is a good shepherd who searches for you. The eyes of the Lord roam to and fro, looking who he can show himself strong to.
Hallelujah.
He's looking for you. His hand is not too short. His arm is not too short to reach out and grab you. He even goes so far as to say, once I got you, nobody can pluck you from my hand. Amen. Nobody can pluck you from my hand. I was walking today and and Amy was getting out of the car, and she had her hands full with one, and the other one, Liam, was getting ready to come to church, and I saw the car pull in, so I stood in front of the car because the car could see me and not see him. So the car stopped because it saw me. What car stopped because it saw Jesus and not you? Y'all ain't saying nothing.
That's right.
Then I stuck my finger out because my hands were full, and he grabbed my finger like he's holding on to me. We think we're holding on to him, but he's holding on. Because when I let go, he's still hanging on. When I let go, no, it's not the option. I don't know where you thought you had an option in this thing, but you're my child, and you'll go where I go, and you'll do what I tell you to do. When I tell you, I'll make you willing to believe. Y'all ain't saying that. I'm just saying because he is the good shepherd. He searches for us. He fights for us. He brings us safety. All of these things. What is he telling us? He says, isn't that what God did in Exodus 3? I'm telling you, the things that you have been looking for, I am.
Hallelujah.
You wanted a God you can see. I am. Thomas said, show us the Father. Jesus says, have I been with you so long? Don't you know that if you've seen me, you've seen the Father? Have you not been paying attention? Have you not been listening? I am the good shepherd. I am the door. I am the light. I am the bread of life. He goes on. I got to hurry up. John 11. I like this one. John 11. When God didn't do what they thought he was going to do, they began to cry and complain. Y'all know John 11. That's the story of Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Lazarus dies. Mary and Martha are all upset. You didn't do anything, Jesus. We've been giving your ministry, and you didn't even show up at the hospital. You didn't even come. I was talking to Peter. He said you knew 3 days ago that he was sick, and you delayed coming. I thought you loved us. Whiny thing.
Baby.
Well, I don't feel bad. Mary's down. She's just down there. My life is over. Jesus shows up and he says, I am the resurrection and the life.
That's right.
Y'all understand that. He walks up to a situation where they're whining and crying and everybody else is talking about death. And he says, I am the resurrection. I am the. Well, I know he's gonna live again in the future someplace when we all get to heaven. No. I'm not telling you in the future I am. I am doesn't say I will be the resurrection and the life. I am. Personally, right now, at this moment, I am the resurrection. I am the life. I am what you have need of. If you can believe all things. Look, here's the funny part. He says, roll the stone away. The first thing they talk about is he stinks. Why is it we're surprised when dead people stink? In church, why is it we're surprised when sinners sin?
That's right. That's right.
Duh! What's the rub, bub? I'm more surprised when they don't. Roll the stone away. And then the resurrection and the life speaks to a corpse. But know ye not that you were dead in your trespasses and sins when he spoke to you and said, loose that man and set him free. Loose him when he said, Lazarus, come forth. Next week, Carmen's going to be in concert. I kind of hope he sings that little song. Lazarus, come forth. Just a great little song. Just Lazarus, come forth. God's saying the same thing to you. I don't care what you've been bound by. He's telling you, come forth. Charles, come forth. Al, come forth. Mark, come forth. Come forth. Come forth out of what? Whatever's got you wrapped up, tied up, tangled up in a dead thing.
Yeah.
Necrophiliac, come out from among that. Quit falling in love with dead stuff.
That's right.
He says, I'm the resurrection. I am the life. Why is that important? Remember in Exodus 3 when he told the children of Israel, I am has sent me? And he took them for 400 years of slavery and says, I'm going to resurrect a nation out of you. I'm going to bring life out of you. Somebody say, how come Moses had to be the person? Because Moses was the only one in Israel who was trained in Pharaoh's house.
That's right.
He was the only person who knew how to lead.
That's right.
Everybody else was a slave. They did what they was told. Moses was trained in Pharaoh's house. He had learned how to be a leader, how to manage, how to think differently than other folk. How to be, my wife and I always say, how to be owners, not employees. There's a huge difference. I don't mean that bad. I'm just saying that's a reality. So God had to get Moses raised in Pharaoh's house, and then he had to get him away from Pharaoh and teach him how to listen to the voice of God, and then he had to teach him how to lead people who don't like to come.
That's right. That's right.
Lead people who don't want. Have you ever really? People are like that. They're like that. People don't know there's freedom available. You're there telling them there's freedom.
And they're like,
And they look at you like, no, I want to be free. Then come here. No, I want to be free. Then come here. No, I want to be free. You can't be free staying where you're at. Listen, this is cool. This is cool. Jesus never went in the tomb of Lazarus.
that's right.
That's right.
He didn't go in there and say, Lazarus, come on, please. Lazarus, I want you to come, please. No. He spoke to him and said, Lazarus, come forth.
That he did.
And all it shows you have Lazarus is walking forth. But that ain't true. If you know anything, he had been mummified.
Uh-huh.
He came forth blind. I'm serious.
Yes.
He came forth blind. He didn't even know where he was going. His face is covered. How do you know? Because the Bible says, loose him, set him free, remove the napkin from his face.
That's right.
Well, how did he get out of the cave then? He followed the voice.
That's right. Yes.
Follow the yellow brick road. I'm just saying. Follow the voice. And what you'll find out is deliverance, freedom, resurrection, and life is there. When they followed the voice of Moses, who was following the voice of God, there was resurrection. There was life. Water came out of a rock. Manna came from heaven. Quail came in. They were sustained through the difficult parts of their life, not by Moses, but by God.
Amen.
So we're seeing the same aspect. Now, let me hurry. John 13. In John 13, this is what Jesus says. They're arguing about who he is. And in John 14, Jesus comes along and says, in my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. So I go to prepare a place for you. They're beginning to talk about how to follow Jesus. And Jesus, somewhere around verse 4, I believe it is, he says this. He says, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. Listen, I got to hurry. I'm not a way.
The way. Yes.
I'm the way.
Hallelujah.
I'm not a way. I don't care what Oprah says.
That's
I don't
right.
care what Deepak Chopra says.
Yeah.
I'm not a way. I'm the way. Ain't nobody else. I had a guy I was talking to this past week. He goes, don't you preach on this? Don't you preach on that? Don't you preach on the other? And I looked at him and I said, no. Well, why not? Why not? Why don't you take your people to the deeper things of life? And I said, because I'm like Paul. If I preach Jesus Christ and him crucified, I'm cool. Because we preach Jesus Christ and him crucified, whatever deep thing you need, you're going to get through.
Yeah.
You start getting off in some of these garbage. Oh, I want to give you a deeper revelation. And you don't know what you're talking about. Because now you've got people who believe maybe a deeper revelation, but they don't know who Jesus is.
That's right.
We got people who go to church and they have great motivational messages, great leadership messages, but who is Jesus in their world?
That's right.
Who is Jesus? If it's not about him, he said, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. No one goes to the Father except by me. You can't get in any other way. So why are you trying to figure out a way to have chimney ministry when Jesus says the chimney is closed?
That's right.
There is a fire in the chimney. You don't want to go down the chimney. There is nothing but pain and suffering in the chimney. But it's a deeper thing of God. I'm going to a higher level. That's going to burn you. Go through the door.
Amen.
Go through the... I've seen people, they're trying to crawl through windows and stuff, and I'll open the door. Hi! Lift stuff up for them. Come on in. Somebody shared a video the other day. I thought it was absolutely hysterical. This guy breaks into this window, pops the window open, pulls it out, climbs through the window, only to find out he has entered the carport. He is a master thief. He has broken into the window and got into the carport that if he'd have just walked around the corner, he could have got in easily. We got a whole lot of folk in church who are trying to pry open some deep revelation of God where they just walk around the corner. Jesus is standing there saying, I'm everything you need. What do you need? I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. I am the resurrection. I am the life. I am the bread. I am the light. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. What do you need?
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Lord.
Too often we get caught up in all this ridiculous garbage. Waste time.
Yep.
Makes you sound spiritual. No, it don't. It makes you sound wacky. I'm telling you, I deal with people all the time. I get people ask me, and I try to be polite, but sometimes I get to the point that I'm like, you know what? You go right ahead. I'll stare. You win. You the best person. You so deep. I know the water is up to here on you, but if you'd stand on your feet, I'm just saying this. I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad at you. Don't misunderstand. Go ahead, man. You want to waste your time on that stuff? Figure it out. Go ahead. But as for me and my house,
Amen.
I'm going to stay with what I know is the way, the truth,
And the life.
and it's going to bring me
Yes.
to life.
Hallelujah.
Let me stop with this last one. I got to hurry. John 15. If y'all do all the stuff, I'll skip it. John 15, Jesus says this, I am the vine,
Yep.
and you are the branches.
That's right.
I want you to see that again. He says, I'm the vine. You're a branch. Your substance and your sustenance is dependent upon your hookup to Jesus.
That's right.
You can't live apart from him. That's why I say don't get caught up in some shh, whatever. So what's your opinion of this pastor? What's your opinion of that? What's your opinion of the other? Who's Jesus? Who's Jesus? Can we just let's just well, that's just the milk of the word. Well, you know, I'm a fat little baby. You know, I just find that that's where some happiness is. Because I can defend this. I can sustain this. And I've read 1 Corinthians enough to know that if that's milk, I ain't smart enough for deep. Read 1 Corinthians. It'll blow your mind.
Yep.
It'll rock your world. I'm still trying to figure out some of the stuff he's talking about. He has such revelation. If we just take the time to dig and unpack and realize that if I stay hooked to him, I'll grow.
That's right. You will.
Stick with me. He also says, is that for me? Thank you. I saw you pull it out, and I thought maybe it was for me, but then you left it there. I was like, I wasn't sure. So, but here's what he says in John 15. He says, we have to stay attached to him. Now listen. This is going to help somebody. He prunes branches.
Yes.
Just because you got cut doesn't mean you're not a branch.
That's right.
That's true.
I would almost argue the fact that you got nipped means you are a branch.
That's right.
Now, if you're cut off,
Yeah. Ain't a good word.
that's something different.
Yep.
Say, Pastor, what do you mean by that? I can't come to church. I've been hurt in church. No, it's called pruning.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, y'all missing a whole bunch of, because people tell me, I got so hurt in church, I can never go back. No, you got bit in church. You got nipped in church. You got pruned in church. You had a wild thing sticking out, and God said, you ain't ready for that. And you're like, oh, they hurt me. Yeah, pruning hurts. If you don't believe that, let me do your nails.
No.
Because if you get cut back just a little bit too far, all of a sudden you'll think your whole world is ended. You'll be like, oh, that hurt. Get you a hangnail, and they're supposed to use those little Sharpie things supposed to cut them off. So then they cut and they pull at the same time. And if you ever get a dull pair where they just pull it, you're like, what is wrong with you? You sadistic, barbarian, North Korean, Hanoi, Hilton loving.
Oh, you're in trouble.
That was my John McCain reference. So, you know, I got to give him respect. I mean, just saying. So you're not, oh! That's called pruning. It doesn't mean you're not part of the branch. It means that God wants you to grow more,
That's
develop more, produce more.
Amen. Yeah.
You're part of the vine. Now stick with me real quick, 'cause I got to stop. John 6, he said, I am the bread. John 15, he said, I am the vine.
Okay.
1 Corinthians 11, Paul said, that which God gave me, I'm going to give to you. On the night that he was crucified, Jesus took the bread
Uh-huh.
and he broke it. And he said, this is my body, which is broken for you. Then he took the cup, which is the fruit of the,
Thine. Yep.
and he says, take, drink. Church, Exodus 3, same thing. All you see for 9 plagues is a display of God's power over the Egyptian gods.
That's right. Yeah.
And then the 10th one, he says, I didn't stop from sacrificing your son, because nothing's going to stop me from sacrificing
My son.
my son
That's right.
for your deliverance.
Amen.
So Israel, you don't have to give up your firstborn son, because I'm giving up mine. He is the bread and he is the wine that we need for salvation,
Amen.
for deliverance, for everything that we need. Jesus says, I am.
Yes.
Amen. Amen.
What God declared in Exodus 3, John, by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, lays out for us in his gospel of who Jesus is, the fulfillment of the I am.
Amen.
And church, I don't know what you've been going through. I don't know what you've been facing. I don't know all the things that have been going on in your world. But I do know the answer.
That's right. Thank you, Jesus.
And if I can quote an old song from the 1970s, Jesus is the answer for the world today.
Amen.
Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way.
Amen.
Jesus is the answer for Terry today.
Amen.
Above him there's no other. Amy, he is the way.
Thank you, Lord.
You see, we keep looking for answers in all the wrong places. But the answer is Jesus.
Yes. Thank you, Father God.
I want you to stand to your feet just very quickly.